Welcome everybody to the show. This is the Mother Tree Network podcast where spirituality and earth wisdom meet racial justice and women's leadership. And today we have our special guest, Dr. Sina Smith. And Dr. Smith is someone who I met at a retreat not too long ago. I was really moved by her fire and her commitment to health and healing, which is not the same thing as contemporary medicine is practiced in this country. I loved her courage when she decided to shift her career, which we'll hear more about, and what she has to share with us about traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and transitioning from winter into spring. So, Sina, the way we like to start off with is by asking you what's good. So, what's good for you today?
Thank you so much, Dr. Kemp, for inviting me to come on your podcast. I've been listening to several episodes and just really enjoying your interview style and the priorities that you have with your listener and the kind of community that you're growing. So I think for me, what's good is the light. I live in Chicago and it gets really dark around the solstice. And I have kind of set a timer for myself, a little mental timer that, I definitely feel it when the light doesn't come out of, when the sun doesn't come up until really late in the morning, and then it's going down again at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so if I can just make it to the end of January, then the light starts to come back a little bit. And so certainly as we're filming this or as we're recording this, the first part of March and getting towards the equinox, it's like, oh, I woke up this morning between 5:30 and 6 o'clock and the room was already a little bit light. And so it was feeling like, okay, there's some return there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love, let me tell you, I love that. I love February for that reason, is that it is definitely, you can see it, the incremental lightening up of the sky in the morning and at night. Oh my gosh, it's such a relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder, you know, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit, Dr. Sina, about your journey. Like I know that you're an MD, and I know that you were practicing as an MD, and I believe as a surgeon.
Yeah, my training after medical school was in general surgery. And I came into that in 2004, which was the first year that there was an 80-hour work week restriction. Before that, you were expected to work however many hours it took to get the job done. And so that tended to be 100, 120 hours. So from that perspective, they were cutting our work hours by 1/3 to
Wow.
get down to 80 hours. And so that was the year when many people tried to match into surgery because there were going to be some work hour restrictions. And there was going to be a little bit more humanity in the surgical specialties. And so I was very fortunate to match into my first choice. But the choice that I made was in a part of the country where my personal values were not in alignment with the group values. And I felt that really hard. It was really challenging coming from a military kid background and places where there was a lot of interracial relationships and so forth, to be in a part of the country where it was very racist and very blatantly racist.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of problems with women also in those contexts. And I am not a girl who has a ponytail and can do the thing. And so I couldn't really fit into the stereotype of what they expected women to do. So there was a lot of bruxing, in that context. And I think my body really responded to that over time. I became very depressed. I put on a lot of weight. I just was having a harder time sleeping, and, I was exhausted, but also couldn't sleep. And finally, I developed radial tunnel syndrome, which is an inflammation of one of the nerves in your arm. And it was from, the mechanics of operating and doing laparoscopic surgery but also once I started studying Chinese medicine, I recognized that particular part of the body is highly related to frustration.
Mm.
And so I woke up one morning and the pain had gotten so bad that my hand became paralyzed. I literally couldn't move my right hand at all, which makes it very difficult to operate.
Mm.
And so I ended up having steroid shots and in bilateral wrist cock-up splints and all kinds of things to try to heal this, but conventional medicine just wasn't touching it. And somebody said to me, "Why don't you try acupuncture for your pain?" And I thought, well, okay, I got nothing to lose. And so I went to the acupuncturist, and while it did help my pain, it didn't last very long in terms of the pain control. So it wasn't enough for me to like have one treatment and then go immediately back to the operating room. But what was shocking is I hadn't had any kind of emotional release at that point for about 2 years. I hadn't cried at all. I was just, head down, one foot in front of the other, trying to get through the 5 years of training. And I started bawling on that table and could not stop. And it was shocking. And I said, I mean, really shocking. I'm a tough chick, and this was just like, homie, don't cry. There's no crying in baseball. You just like do your thing. And so I said to the acupuncturist when he came back in, what's going on with this emotional thing? And he said, "You just have really bad liver qi stagnation." And then kind of like took my needles out and walked out of the room. And I was like, wait. I know about the liver. Like I take people's livers out and I put them in other people. I know liver. Mm-hmm. And this is not liver. And very graciously and tenderly and compassionately, he kind of led me down this path, and I started getting interested in the theory of Chinese medicine. It literally never occurred to me that you could put the body together in a way that was not, biochemistry and anatomy. And so I got very interested in acupuncture. And when it became clear that my pathology was not going to be resolved fast enough for me to be able to continue my surgical training, I had to make a very hard decision about like, okay, well, I've got this MD, I've got a couple of master's degrees, I've done a fellowship, and now I can't operate, so I'm not hireable at an academic medical center. What am I going to be when I grow up? I wanted to be a surgeon since I was 4.
Wow.
And I had all this debt, and my husband and I had invested, all this time and energy in my medical and surgical training. And 10 years later, I've got nothing really. And it was terrifying. It was really terrifying. And so I went to an acupuncture course that was led by doctors for doctors. And they had the same kind of jerk style of training that I've just been experiencing in my surgery residency. And I was like, I don't want anything to do with these people anymore. So my husband sold his business, and we sold our house, and we left and moved to Los Angeles. And I started studying acupuncture there from people that had learned in China and Japan and Korea. In the Chinese system anyway, everybody goes to the same medical school, and then acupuncture is like a residency. So instead of becoming a cardiologist, you would become an acupuncturist. Mm-hmm. And they do herbs, separately from that. Mm-hmm. So I just had the most, I get teary-eyed just thinking about it. I had the most compassionate, lovely people taking care of me in those times, because it was a time of great pain and suffering. And insecurity about, like just how am I going to pay for this house that I own in my head?
Yeah.
In terms of the medical debt and everything.
Yeah.
And they very slowly brought me back to life.
And
wow. From acupuncture and Chinese medicine, I became interested in integrative medicine, and from there culinary medicine, because there's a strong emphasis on food as medicine in traditional Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
And just really sort of regrew and redefined myself in those several years out there. Came back to Chicago and began opening a private practice very cautiously, slowly. That's a whole other learning curve, right?
Sure is.
Like, now I have to do my business taxes, and what does that mean? And how do I get an online presence? And like, oh, just all the things that it goes
Yes.
with small business owners. My goodness. And then about 7, 8 years into that, I got a phone call from one of the medical schools, and they asked me to come down and design their integrative and culinary medicine program. So for about 3.5 years, I was at a medical school, and I feel very fortunate for that time because it was during COVID. And so I was under the blanket of a large medical organization. I didn't have to lay anybody off. I didn't have to ask for grant money to keep my rent going as a small business owner and all of that sort of thing. And so I'm very, very grateful that that was the turn of events. But towards the end of that, there were some issues with a promised raise that didn't come, some issues with my boss and with the hierarchy and the structure of the medical school, and then a sexual harassment situation where somebody in power at the medical school tried to kiss me when I was his patient, or when he was my patient in clinic. And so it was just like multiple different layers of things, and I decided that this was just not a good place for me to be. So in the last couple of months, I've restarted my clinical practice in Chicago. I'm back in Chicago again. I'm teaching classes online, which I'm really enthusiastic about. I'm working on writing a book about all my experiences. And I just yesterday morning came up with the title, which is In Search of Healing.
Yes.
And yeah, so I feel like I've been reborn yet again, and moving into a whole new space and defining myself. And so in that context, I've changed my name from going by my middle name to my first name. I've changed the practice from being a physical space to being online. I'm doing more outreach across the country because I get questions all the time. Can you treat me in New York City? Can you treat me in North Carolina? No, but I can give you this class.
Yes.
So, yeah. So that's kind of where I am.
Wow. Wow. That is a journey and a half. I want to go back to that thing about your body refusing to work, refusing to keep you in the surgical residency. As you said, it just responded to acupuncture, but not in the way that would allow you to continue that residency.
Right. It prevented me. Well, I'll say it this way. It helped me get off the merry-go-round.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
when you're on the merry-go-round, it's really hard to see, like, how can I possibly step away from this?
yes.
And my colleagues, my medical colleagues, feel so trapped in the system,
Yes.
in a system that they are not nurtured by.
Yeah.
They don't have the kind of interpersonal relationships that they signed up for when they were baby doctors.
Yeah.
They hate the medical system, I think, more than patients do.
Oh my.
And they can't get off the merry-go-round.
Well, and what you're showing us though, is because sometimes we have the word can't in there, because we don't see a choice implanted in the situation. All we see is what we have to do.
Absolutely.
And I'm putting this in quotation marks because when the body stops, then all of a sudden we see, oh, well, not only do I have a choice not to continue, but my body's actually telling me I have to do something else, that I can do something else. I will figure it out. And I just want to go back to the tears, Leslie. I mean, I don't know why I even called you that. I never knew that was your name until today.
It's a transition. It's fine.
Sina, I want to go back to when you talked about tears, and how it took acupuncture to help you release. And then you very easily teared up today. So I wonder about how you have evolved, that your tears are so available to you now.
Oh, what a great question. I think, and I see so much of the way the world works now in the context of Chinese medicine. And this time of year is all about like regrowth and rebirth and so forth. That goes with the wood system, which is the main organ of the wood system is the liver. And when the liver, it's a very outward moving organ. It's the thing that drives change, right? Without the liver, without the desire to grow, without the desire to change, we would all just like live in our parents' basement for the rest of our lives. But because our parents drive us crazy, we move out, right? We make a change. And when things get bad enough, we make a change. And if that change can't happen, the growth gets squelched and turns either into hopelessness or turns into anger and frustration. And so when you're in a situation every day in, day out, where you're being squelched, the liver chi can't flow smoothly. And so it gets trapped and stagnant. And that includes emotions. So we don't have access to sadness. We don't have access to grief. We don't have access to fear. We don't have access to, joy. All of those things get kind of trapped in the frustration and the depression. And for anybody who's ever been depressed, you literally feel numb. You can't feel anything else but that stuckness. And so it takes a release of the liver chi to be able to have access to all the different emotions, which give life its beauty, right? Without grief, we wouldn't accept the true meaning of time. It's because our dog dies that we're able to treasure the time that we have with that animal, right? So without death, there would be no real appreciation of time, of the time as being limited and so forth, and as a day being a unit of time and so forth. So I'm saying all of that to just say that the richness of human experience comes from the richness of all the emotions together. The goal of life is not like joy, like mania. The goal of life is peace and satisfaction, sitting in between all of those different emotions and letting ourselves be with them. So having access to my emotions now, I think is a result of better emotional health. Not that is still an ongoing wound. I think I've transformed that wound into a scar in a healthy way, that it's there, and I can still lean into what that felt like to be in those moments. But it does. I feel much more comfortable being an emotional human being rather than having to like be tough girl all the time.
Yeah, I feel that. There are a lot of people who listen to this podcast and who are in the Mother Tree community who are who've been through tough things, and who probably get called strong a lot, and it is so good when we can match that strength with vulnerability. It just feels like more freedom.
Yes. And I've been thinking a lot about, resilience versus quitting in the context of strength like that, right? That what we tend to honor in our society is like, no, I'm just going to push through. I'm going to be resilient. I'm going to bounce back, instead of saying like, no, enough is enough. I'm out of here. I don't need to do this. And allowing yourself the space to make a different decision, even though you've gone down the path towards, okay, well, this is my end point. This is my end point. I'm going to be a surgeon. Like, it doesn't matter what I have to give up in order to get to that place. And I feel like one of the best things I ever did for myself was to quit.
Wow. Okay. I want to say it out loud. Say it one more time.
I think one of the best things I ever did in my life was to quit. And quitting this more recent job came more quickly because I knew that if I leap, the net will appear. I don't have to be afraid about what is going to come next. And I don't have to have all the plans laid out from now until the end of time for the rest of my life. I can say, okay, I'm going to have blonde hair this week, and I'm going to have purple hair next week, and I'm going to have red hair the week after that, which is something that I do often.
Mm,
just like inviting the change and kind of the scariness that goes with the change is also really thrilling and exciting.
it is. I want to go back to this thing because quitting like a job to me, or even closing down a business that you loved, but that is no longer the thing for you,
Mhm.
to me, it's like it's not quitting yourself, you know?
Right.
And sometimes we get them mixed up and it feels like I'm failing when I say no to something or I've had enough of this. And if people could see your face right now, they would see someone who looks really good. Honestly, you do not look exhausted. You do not look like you're running on coffee and like you're, sneaking cigarettes out back. And, I don't know what people do to get through jobs that are 80, 120 hours a week. I don't really know what they do. But you do look like an alive person who's got some joy going on somewhere.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Especially
Yeah,
at 51, it's nice to hear that you don't look
exactly.
exhausted.
Exactly. And that's the other thing, Sina, is to be willing to make a change when you're 51 or 48 or 60, to be willing to continue evolving your life.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think growing up in a military family helped me to be a lot more comfortable with change because I went to, 8 different schools in the 12 years that I was in elementary and high school. And you just get used to, okay, well, the system is going to be a little bit different and the principal is going to be a little bit different and the layout of the school is going to be a little bit different. And let me just kind of work with that. Um, and I think that change, I think if we focus a little bit more on the excitement of change and the exploration piece of it, then we would get out of the constant thinking of change is bad and change is scary and change is hard. It really doesn't, I mean, it is those things, but it's not any more those things than it is exciting and fresh and new and rejuvenating. So all things in balance, I think.
Mm. Well, speaking of change, one of the things that you and I had talked about before, starting the interview was winter transitioning to spring. And you were sharing some ideas with me about like how traditional Chinese medicine looks at that transition in terms of like food and elements. What can we do to support ourselves to move into opening up? Which
Mm-hmm.
to me, spring is like letting myself be seen. It's making movement happen. It's taking active steps. So, what kinds of things do you suggest that people do, or foods or practices?
Yeah, absolutely. The traditional East Asian medicine principles talk about how the winter time is a time of being the seed, right? Going inside, getting ready for the next growth phase, doing lots of internal work, lots of journaling, lots of meditating, lots of like snuggling by the fire with a cup of hot tea kinds of stuff. But then
Love
when the
it.
spring, yeah, when the spring starts to come around, we have this natural desire to go outside. We've been inside for 3 months. Enough is enough. I want to breathe the fresh air. I want to be outside. And so things like vigorous exercise and running and swimming and biking all help to start moving that green liver spring woody chi around. Um, and the energy of the liver goes upward and outward, just like a tree. So green foods, especially those spring foods are really helpful. Parsley and kale and Swiss chard, collard greens, like all the things that are really, really green and a rich green in chlorophyll help to kind of regenerate the liver.
Hmm.
Also, pungent things go out, right? When you bite into a radish, it kind of like spreads out in your mouth. It's really outwardly going.
Hmm.
So radishes are really, really great for the springtime because they help to move the chi and open up the meridian. And radishes also tend to be kind of a springtime food.
Okay, I want you to hold right there because I got to go back
Sure.
to that liver.
Yeah.
So you said the liver energy goes out like a tree?
Yes.
Tell us what you mean by that.
So in Chinese medicine, you probably have seen the little Taiji symbol, the yin and yang symbol that looks like
Yes.
a circle. I drew it here on the board in case your users wanted to see this also. So it's the dark and the light.
Yes.
Principle there is that things are in balance. So things that are heavy are counterbalanced by things that are light. Things that go inward are counterbalanced by things that go outward, and so forth. And so yin and yang becomes a yin and yang pair of organs in the body, of times of the year, of cycles of the day, et cetera, et cetera. And when we break that out physiologically, we think about 5 elements: fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And the wood energy comes after water, which is the winter time and is the kidneys and the urinary bladder. And the wood is the liver and the gallbladder. And so the liver has kind of an interesting job in Chinese medicine. It's both the holder of the blood, which is yin. And if you look at liver, like in the grocery store or whatever, it looks like a big blood-filled sponge, right?
Yes,
so
it does.
holding the blood. But then its job is to circulate and move the qi, which is yang. So it has a lot of tension in its job description, holding and also moving, which can lead to frustration, right?
Yes.
If you don't know what you're doing, like, am I supposed to be holding? Am I supposed to be moving? Am I holding?
I feel
Am I
like
holding?
that is me. I feel like that is so me. I am a liver. Okay. Keep going about the tree and the liver.
Yes. And so the upward growth of the tree is trying to move away from the earth and at the same time is being held by the earth. So there's always this tension in trees, right? And if they don't have deep roots, they can't grow high. If they don't have deep roots, they can't branch outward. And it's the transformation of earth and soil into this upward and outward movement that allows them to put out branches and then receive energy from the sun. So this counterbalancing business is all spring kind of energy, right? We're not ready to be just sort of laying out in the sun like we are in the summertime. Some days we need a light sweater. Some days we need a jacket. Some days it's going to be raining. Some days it's going to be sunny. So there's this kind of like, back and forth sort of energy all the time. And when we eat foods that are undergoing the same process, right? Those new green leafy things that are coming up out of the ground, then we're taking the same tension and allowing our body to be nurtured by that.
Wow. I love that alignment.
Yes.
It's
We're
like,
supposed to eat seasonal foods.
yeah, attune.
Yeah.
Attune.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said the liver is the holder and the center outer.
Yes.
And I just feel like that's such a powerful, and if you think about the word liver, the person who lives is a liver.
Ooh. Yeah.
Okay, that might be kind of weird. we may have gone to the Amanda zone. But I love that, and I want you to say there's something about wood. I don't know what it is, but when I was thinking about the spring equinox and asking my intuition, like, what does it mean? For me, it was that transition from being inward to outward, from hiding to being seen. And then when I was planning out what we're going to be doing during the retreat, just today, I said, our first full day is going to be, the theme is water. And then the next day, the theme is land.
Mm.
And I was like, why that way? And I was like, I don't know. But I think you just told me, because you said that water is associated with winter and then wood is spring, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then earth kind of makes a little triangle here.
Yes.
So going around the outside of the circle, they support each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the inside of the circle, they're controlling each other.
Mm-hmm.
So because you can't have unlimited growth, just like you can't have unlimited restriction.
Yes.
So earth is all about how we nurture ourselves. It's the digestion, how we interface with the earth itself, the foods that we take in, and so forth. And then the metal is the lung and the large intestine. So they're the most external of the internal organs. So how do we take in what is helpful and let go immediately of what is not? So we take in oxygen, let go of carbon dioxide. We take in food, let go of fecal matter. And then it's also how we protect ourselves. Metal is our armor. So it goes with the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
So it just becomes a really, really interesting way to think about the body and the way that the body interacts with the outside world, and the way that the energetics of the food that we put in have an impact on our health, and the kinds of breathing exercises that we can do to support ourselves, and the kinds of meditation practices we might use at one time of the year or another. It
Okay.
becomes really fun.
Yes. It's like a puzzle. It's like an ever
Yes.
growing upward and outward deepening puzzle. Now I have to ask you something. Um, so I do want to know what kinds of meditative practices or energetic practices you would suggest as we transition from winter into spring. So let's put a pin in that, because you just said something. Shoot. Oh, I wanted to tell you this and ask you. So I've been seeing an acupuncturist regularly for like a couple years now,
Uh-huh.
who is Chinese, who was trained in China. And one of the things she said to me one day was like, your energy is so low. She says, your energy is so low. Your chi is low or whatever. And I was like, okay. And then as we were ending the appointment, I said to her, well, what is it that you suggested I do? To raise it. She goes, in Chinese medicine, we don't say, what do you add? We say, what do you need to take out? And I was
Absolutely.
like, oh, okay. And and I gave me something to think about. So I guess I just want to throw that out there and see maybe what's your take on that.
Yeah, the winter time is definitely the time to do less. That time after the holiday, and I think that's why the holidays exhaust so many people,
Mm-hmm.
because the solstice is naturally a time of quiet and peace. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to find the perfect present for all the people that could possibly, need or want a present, and to get it shipped off and get it in the mail. And then we've got to have Halloween, or we've got to have holiday parties. And then we've got to have the right people over for, it's just so much. But what I love about January is all that is out of the way. And then we can just kind of sit quietly in that peaceful place and start transitioning into spring. So the springtime is the time to start doing, like physically doing more things, but not to be adding more to our plates. The power of no is, I think, always a really strong guide in Chinese medicine. And it is a good time to take on projects, but not to be, filling up your plates with over and over and over, overflowing kinds of stuff.
Mm. And that just reminds me of something else you said, because you also said that in the day it has all these different rhythms in a single day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So doing too, even if it's the height of summer, it's possible to do too much, to be out of balance. You want to stay in sync.
Right. The time that the liver and the gallbladder are most active is from 11 o'clock at night until 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. And so when we're overdoing, we tend to lay down, and then we're overthinking. And so there's a lot of insomnia that happens there. We wake up with a lot of frustration kinds of dreams. We start bruxing our teeth. We start grinding our teeth. All that frustration and anger and desire to do, right? Desire to move forward, desire to make changes, desire to get things done starts to come to the surface in the nighttime. It was
Wow.
also really interesting as a surgeon, because that's also the time that everybody comes in with gallbladder attacks. There's a thing called the migrating myoelectric complex, which is like a housekeeping function in the gut. And so your gut kind of does a dry run with no food in it, to just sweep out all the stuff that was in the way. And so that includes secreting a little bit of pancreatic juice, secreting a little bit of bile, which comes from the gallbladder. And so if you've got a stone in the gallbladder and it gets into the way, then it starts to hurt around 1 o'clock in the morning, and you come into the ER at 2 a.m. and we have to take your gallbladder out in the middle of the night. So it's just really fascinating to me. This system is not created out of thin air, not somebody's idea that they kind of downloaded. They're paying attention to the natural rhythm of things and identifying, like, oh, okay, this tree growth is like this, and the color of bile is bright green and looks like spring shoots, and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very interesting, like, naturalistic approach to thinking about how human beings fit in with the rhythm of life.
Mm. So,
Sounds good.
so Sina, this has been so good. The time has gone so fast. If people want to get in touch with you to find out more about you and your online classes, or if they're in the Chicago area, get to actually, get that hands-on treatment, how do they find you?
Yeah, the name of my business is Chicago Healing Center. And so chicagohealingcenter.com is my website. And from there, you can link to one-on-one appointments. You can link to all the classes that I'm teaching. I'm giving a workshop in a couple of months that will be about using 5-element theory to support the growth of little people.
Nice.
How we interact with our kids, and it takes a lot of the judgment around out of the system, around the conversations with having interactions with our children. And so all of that can be found on that website. And then I'm working on a couple of books. The first one is How Your Body Works. So, but it's in early stages of development, and then I'll be working on some other things. And I've got a lot of academic writing that's coming out too. So that's kind of the main website for getting in touch with me.
Well, it's beautiful. Very simple. chicagohealingcenter.com. I
Yeah.
think we can all manage to find that. And thank you. Thank you so much for just bringing in the liver energy, letting us know, we're going from water into wood right now. So pay attention to that. And is there, I don't know, is there any final word that you want to say or give to people?
No, I feel really honored to be asked to participate in this, really and truly. This is my first podcast. I've been on TV, I've been on radio and stuff like that, but this is my first podcast. And meeting you at the retreat where we did and how we did, I really honor the work that you're doing. Aminata Soul, plant walker, fire woman. I think you're just an amazing human, and I'm very grateful to have participated, and thank you for inviting me into your network.
Mm, you are so welcome. You are so welcome. And so with that, we're going to wrap up the show. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.